But I'm Simon Rosenberg from NDN and MPI. We're excited about this event today, and I just want to warn everybody that all four of us are using PowerPoints, or presentations anyway, so just get used to watching that screen over there and not us. But we've got a wonderful event today that is one in a series of events we've been doing over the last few years about how media is changing advocacy and communications in politics, and that this one is about sort of one that's very close to my heart as a former television producer and writer, about how TV itself is changing. And we have done a lot of work at NDN in trying to advise the progressive movement about how this media transformation is affecting everything we do. This is one of the, I think, the most interesting events that we've done in the 3 years since we began NPI in the spring of 2005. And before we begin, and I'm going to introduce everybody after I sit down, what I'd like to do is just remind everybody a little bit about some of the things we've been saying to sort of set up this whole event today. So we're going to move slowly over to that screen over there. And so first of all, the essential argument that we make is that there's a new politics emerging in America, and that it has three components. That first is that there's a new radical set of media and technology tools that are changing the way we all communicate and advocate, that we are also seeing an incredible rapid shift of our population, perhaps the most significant change in the people of the United States since the Europeans arrived here a long time ago, and that also there's the emergence of a whole new set of governing challenges, very 21st century in nature, and that these three things together are creating a 21st century politics that are very different from the politics of the 20th century. What we have done through NPI is spend a lot of time talking about the media and tech transformation, and we have put out 8 papers to help all of you understand how to navigate all this. And they are Buy Cable, Engage the Blog, Speak in Spanish, Use Search, right? Reimagine Video, Go Mobile, Leverage Social Networks, and Target Your Marketing. These are free. They're on our website at newpolitics.net. There's video backing all of them up. They're being widely used in the progressive movement today. And this has really been our contribution to the family to try to help everybody what are universal challenges, no matter where you sit. Whether you're a communications director for a state representative in Ohio or you're the communications director of the DNC, all of us are facing these same set of challenges in how media is transforming. And what's important to remember as we're going to talk about TV today, the most important media in politics, is that we are really coming to the end of one very long era of political communications and the beginning of a new one. And just to remind us, that we began this era that we call the broadcast era of political communications back in the 1920s and 1930s with the advent of radio. And those are all black and white images. They look old, but radio was as radical in that day as the internet is today. And when FDR started speaking regularly to the citizens of the United States, it was the first time in human history that a leader was able to speak directly in real time to his own voters or his own citizens, and it created much greater intimacy and created literally a new politics of that day, of which FDR was clearly a master. What we know about broadcast, though, is it didn't sit still, and this is informative for us as we look at the media tech change today, is that broadcast evolved, and television came along. It was slowed down by World War II, but it came about, and where politics and TV collided was really in the 1960s, starting with the Kennedy-Nixon debates, that famous Daisy ad in 1964, the social change movements in the 60s that came into America's living room as never before. And so our relationship, again, changed because of media to politics. And what politics really became about, starting in the 1960s, was fundamentally about mastering television. Whether it was the 30-second spot or the 8-second soundbite on the evening news, the whole goal of politics was about getting on TV. And even to the point in the 1992 Clinton campaign, when I was in the war room, we renamed GOTV to be Get on Television, right? Instead of Get Out the Vote. It was that obsessive to us in the 92 campaign. But that world of 20th century broadcast, this construct that we call broadcast, is breaking up, right? These 4 key pillars of 20th century political communications are giving way to a new one. And let's just look at these numbers. They're kind of amazing. Every time I look at these, newspaper circulation is plummeting in the United States, right? You're seeing, this is the first 6 months of 2006, huge precipitous drop in readership of newspapers, even very good newspapers, right? These aren't bad newspapers. We're seeing huge precipitous drops in radio usage, which is very important for progressives because conservatives dominate radio so much in the United States, right? And then what we're talking about today is about television, and that television has left the broadcast era of communications and is now in this new state where it is transforming, and that's really what we're going to be spending the rest of today talking about. A couple things just to put on the table, because we're not going to cover everything today, is that the first big change that came about through the challenge to broadcast was the rise of cable, right? In 2001, on a daily basis, more people were watching cable than broadcast. I mean, it's not well known in this city that that was the case. There were more eyeballs 7 years ago watching more cable than broadcast. We're going to get into this a little bit more later, the rise of DVRs. This is going to be a major subject of the discussion today. Huge game-changing event. And we've also are seeing, though, that the internet is going to also have an impact on television. We're seeing now the emergence of the second wave of the internet, which is now high bandwidth, which is allowing music and television and film to move over the internet, which is obviously a big change. And you see it now. People can watch TV on the internet as never before. And in part, this is being driven by deepening broadband penetration in the home, right? You're seeing a much greater broadband penetration. And the broadband infrastructure is being extended to mobile phones, right? So what you have is you have the beginning of this new era. For example, an early manifestation of this sort of web-based video, as you've seen it in this campaign. You've seen it with the macaca stuff in 2006. But what it really means is that what we're seeing is we're leaving the broadcast age of communications and entering an age and an arc of transition from broadcast, which is one out to many, to one that's going inevitably towards a more one-to-one, highly segmented, highly targeted 21st century media environment. And that what we're going to be talking about today is where we are in that arc when it comes to TV, right? About how TV itself is changing with some of the leading thinkers about this. And so our basic argument here is that when you think, for those of us in politics who are obsessed with television, as you have to be, you need to think about how TV is no longer that thing up in the upper left, but it's becoming video TV, whatever we're going to call it, is being liberated from the monopoly distribution of broadcast TV, right? That's part of what's happening, is that it now is being unleashed to all of us in different ways, and that it's now going to be accessible in very different ways, in different forms, and it's going to require a tremendous amount of experimentation in this century, in this decade, in the way that we did in the 60s and 70s to understand it. To drill down on one final thing, because we're not going to cover this today, the major thing we've been arguing for 3 years has been about this rise of cable. And amazingly in politics, and I won't go through all of it, in 2000, the quick statistic was in 2004, for every $4 spent on cable in the real world, in the commercial world, $5 was spent on broadcast. In politics, it was 18 to 1. It means that essentially in the commercial advertising world, there was as much money being spent on cable advertising as broadcast, with a little bit of difference. In politics, we essentially were not using cable at all. It was an incredible, it was an incredible lack of a powerful new tool that was not being used effectively. And I just want to show one very graphic symbol about why this is so important for people in this business, right? And there are people here today who control large budgets who are going to be making decisions on these things. This is California 11, which was a congressional district highly contested in the 2006 elections. And in the old model of buying broadcast, you had two choices to reach into that district. You had San Francisco and Sacramento, right? So let's see what you would do if you bought San Francisco to get into that district, right? You would be wasting 90 cents on the dollar off the top. That means that poor candidate who was out there spending 6 hours a day, raising money every day, 90% of all that money was immediately wasted, knowingly wasted, by the media consultants and the media buyers when they bought those ads as recently as 2006. And so you say, well, God, that sucks. Can't we do a better job than that? Well, let's see what Sacramento gets you. Well, Sacramento's worse, right? 96% waste. And what this means is that this was habitual, common in how we did everything. And it's our estimate that half of all money spent on television and politics today is knowingly wasted by the media consultants and the media buyers. And that there simply has to be a better way. Because we cannot, at a strategic level, knowingly be wasting 50, 60, 70% on the dollar when there are now lots of alternatives to reach things more effectively. So what didn't exist 6 years ago was this ability for you to buy cable that was, let's say, not 100% in California 11, but let's say 80% and so you had a 20% waste and bleed as opposed to a 90%. That wasn't available. And so one of our big recommendations has been to buy cable. And to make sure that as you are looking at your media offerings and TV, to make sure you're effectively using this powerful new tool of cable. And so just to end with, and I won't go through it all, and just to get into the session today, is that what we're not going to be talking about is cable today too much. We're going to be talking now really about the next generation of what's going to be coming with television, and we have an amazing panel. And let me just introduce everybody, and we'll get right into it.